It's codenamed J35Y8. And it's the new V6 for the 2023 Honda Pilot. Except that this time, Honda's dropped its iconic variable valve timing VTEC and added an additional camshaft for each bank. I'm talking about the first naturally aspirated dual overhead cam V6 in any Honda or Acura since the first generation NSX. Today we're looking at the new V6 engine, why Honda dropped VTEC, and how this engine will be significantly cheaper. Let's just dive right in. So the new V6 has the same bore, stroke, and compression ratio as the previous engine. In other words, the diameter of the cylinder is the same. Also, the phase of the engine cycle when the piston travels from top to bottom or vice versa is the same. And the ratio of the volume of the cylinder combustion chamber with its piston at the bottom position and top position is also the same. But now, here's what's interesting. It's not what this new engine has, but what the engine has left behind. Instead of Honda's iconic VTEC system, it has an additional set of camshafts by way of the TLX Type S's double overhead cam heads. To appreciate the change, you have to understand what VTEC is in the first place. Most car enthusiasts have heard of VTEC, but to be honest, not many understand or appreciate how it works. VTEC is a type of variable valve timing system that Honda specifically developed. It's been used in Honda and Acura models since 1989, including the Acura NSX and Integra Type R, as well as the Honda S2000 and the Civic Type R. VTEC helps improve the efficiency of the engine and enables the engine to perform a lot better at higher RPMs. And the VTEC system also gets you low fuel consumption at lower RPM. But here's the thing, the Honda VTEC system is distinct and is nowhere near the average variable valve timing system you find in other cars. Most other systems increase the oil pressure to shift the timing of the camshaft and open the valves earlier. But the Honda VTEC engine has two different cam profiles on a single camshaft. First, we have two rocker arms with their own low-profile cams for each cylinder. The engine operates these when you're at low RPM and low load, and the rocker arms are on lock. And then there's also a central rocker arm with its own high-profile cam. It's unused at low RPMs. But at higher RPMs, the engine operates with a larger cam profile. As engine speed rises, the piston inside the rockers gets pressurized with oil, and that locks all three cams together to increase valve load. In other words, the opening gets bigger and therefore enables more air to get into the engine. And actually, that's why you hear the iconic sound of the VTEC kicking in. It's that raw, loud, high-revving signature sound that gets your adrenaline running. Funny enough, Honda first came up with the VTEC concept in the 1980s. It used it first for its CBR 400 motorcycle back in 1983. At that time, the concept was called Revolution Modulated Valve Control, or REV for short. It wouldn't be another 6 years until Honda would first add VTEC to one of its cars, the 1989 Honda Integra XSI, thereby creating an uproar in the car industry. Other car makers use variable valve timing, but they use different mechanisms and technologies. For example, BMW has Valvetronic. Toyota's technology is called VVTL/I. Honda wasn't the first to use variable valve timing, but it was a pioneer with its VTEC technology because it was the first car maker to combine lockable rocker arms and dual profile cams. It enabled Honda to combine two engine characteristics into one single engine and change it while it was still running. The concept and mechanism itself is so simple in hindsight, yet the output and result was remarkable. Anyway, here's the thing about the Honda's new V6. It doesn't have Honda's signature VTEC system at all, and it comes as a surprise, since VTEC has been so iconic to Honda. It begs the most obvious question, if VTEC's so great, why is Honda ditching it on this engine? The new J35Y8 V6 engine boosts the horsepower up to 285 horses in total in the new Honda Pilot. That's just a nominal gain of 5 horsepower. And the car retains its current 262 pound-feet of torque. But where the new engine really shines is when it comes to emissions. And that's why Honda ditched its VTEC. So you can blame it on emissions and regulations. It turns out the new engine is significantly cleaner than preceding ones. We're talking some 40 to 50% reduction in emissions with this new engine. Part of this efficiency improvement comes down to the engine's improved direct injection system. This improved system means more precise fuel delivery. On top of that, the system can also add up to 3 sprays per combustion cycle. And in the process, it uses smaller injector holes. And because there's no VTEC, the cam phasers can now continuously and precisely adjust intake and exhaust timing. But, well, let's just say that there hasn't been too much excitement around the new engine. Actually, some Honda fans are pretty disappointed since it doesn't have the same performance gains that Honda owners were hoping for. But here's the thing. Its intent is to help Honda bridge the gap until it either electrifies its current lineup or develops new EVs. Honda's another late bloomer in the EV game. It's trying to catch up with this newer, cleaner V6 as a stopgap measure. In the car world, Honda's been neck to neck with Toyota. These two Japanese car giants have been making waves for years. If you ask me, I think competition in the car industry is a good thing. It's what moves the car makers to constantly up their game, take risks, and innovate. And that's good for the end consumer, us. Honda and Toyota's rivalry have been described as one of the hottest rivalries in the industry. Each offer its own unique cars, some of which have become very iconic, with a cult-like following. Each company has influenced the entire car industry for decades. But of course, the two companies aren't exactly alike. They may share similar interests, but there are key differences between the two. For example, if you look at Honda, you'll see that Honda puts its focus on speed and handling, contrast to the Toyota, which prioritizes dependability and reliability instead. Despite different strategies, each have put out some of the most legendary car engines to date. Toyota just doesn't have one specific famous engine. Rather, Toyota is generally known for everything from its tiny 3-cylinders to a V10 and even iconic inline 6s. Honda, on the other hand, is quintessentially famous for VTEC engines. VTEC's been around for 30 plus years. In fact, there are 5 particular VTEC engines that are notable in my book as the top Honda engines of all time. You could say these engines were VTEC milestones in their own right. It first started with the 1989 Honda Integra XSI. That was the first Honda to ever use the VTEC system, and it came with a B16 engine, which some Honda fans still call one of the greatest engines of all time. The first generation B16A engine was a 1.6-liter 4-cylinder double overhead cam VTEC engine. It output 160 horsepower at 7,600 RPM and 110 pound-feet of torque at 7,000 RPM. It was also a milestone because it was the first ever mainstream naturally aspirated engine to hit the 100 horsepower per liter mark. I say mainstream because, if you want to get technical, the first production car to hit that mark was the Ferrari 250 GTO. But let's be real, Ferrari's not really mainstream. A year later, we saw the C30A, and we saw it in the NSX, which is Honda's first attempt at a super sports car. That's when Honda started getting into Formula One. The first generation C30A was a 3-liter double overhead cam VTEC naturally aspirated V6 engine, and this engine churned out 270 horsepower at 7,300 RPM, 209 pound-feet of torque at 6,500 RPM. Half a decade later, we then had the B18C in the 1995 Honda Integra Type R DC2. I'm talking about a 1.8-liter 4-cylinder double overhead cam VTEC engine. The engine pumped out 197 horsepower at 8,000 RPM. Max torque was 131 pound-feet at 7,200 RPM. In fact, it was hailed as the ultimate Honda VTEC. Others called it the greatest front-wheel drive performance car ever, and even the best handling front-wheel drive car ever, and it was for its time. Another notable VTEC was the F20C. The first car to be blessed with that engine was the 1999 Honda S2000 Roadster. It was a front-engine, rear-wheel drive sports car with an open top. We're talking a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine that generated 246 horsepower at 8,600 RPM and a maximum torque of 150 pound-feet of torque at 7,500 RPM. The F20C won the record for the highest specific output of a naturally aspirated engine in a production car. And in fact, it held that record for a solid 11 years. It wasn't until 2010 when Ferrari beat the record with 458. And even then, it only trumped the record by a mere 1 horsepower per liter. Ha! And of course, we had the famous K-Series engine. It was the successor to Honda's iconic B-Series engine as a flagship 4-cylinder double overhead cam engine. It was larger than the B-Series since its engine displacement ranged from 2 to 2.4 liters, compared to the B-Series engine, which ranged from 1.6 to 2 liters. We saw the K-Series engine in Honda from the early 2000s till the mid-2010s. And actually, it's still even used in current Civic Type Rs. In particular, the K20A is especially noteworthy. It's a high-performance variant that you see in the Type R model, like the DC5 Integra Type R and the FD2 Civic Type R. I'm talking 222 horsepower at 8,000 RPM and peak torque of 159 pound-feet of torque at 6,100 RPM. But let's talk a bit about the pros and cons of a VTEC engine. Even though Honda's new engine doesn't have VTEC, previous models do. So if you're in the market for a Honda, for example, it'll help you know the pros and cons of VTEC. I'd say that the biggest advantage to VTEC is, well, basically, VTEC is the replacement for displacement. VTEC gives you a ton of power at very high RPM. Contrast that with an average ordinary engine with standard variable valve timing, and it's not possible. So if you're looking to get power and you want to save a few bucks, VTEC is probably one of your best bets. And even if your vehicle outputs, let's say, 110 horsepower, it'll feel a lot faster than a car that generates more power. That's because you'll have to shift later and beat a car with more power in a straight line. They say the sky's the limit when you're running a VTEC. VTEC also delivers significant fuel economy at lower RPMs, especially if it's a single overhead cam VTEC. Reason is, it has one camshaft. But bear in mind, VTEC has a set of disadvantages too. I'd say one of the biggest is that turbo engines are longer VTECs. I mean, they might be called VTEC, but that's not the case. That's because the VTEC is moved to the exhaust camshaft instead of the intake. So no more performance or the sounds of the VTEC kicking in. But now, you tell me, what do you think of Honda's new V6 engine? And what brand do you prefer, Honda or Toyota? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.